what our software essentially does, to use a really cheesy analogy, is if you send the software a picture of the Death Star, it'll tell you how many black Lego bricks or gray Lego bricks that are needed to rebuild this structure. That's essentially what construction looks like. You take a complex home with this roof and this architecture or whatever, send it into the software, and then the software breaks that down into zeros and ones so that it can be made on an assembly line with automation in our factory floor.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 340. The way we build homes hasn't changed in over a century. And with an unprecedented demand for new housing across the country, we can't build fast enough. My guest today has built a business that leverages technology to reverse the dire housing crisis by building custom homes in less than 5 days. Garrett Moore is the founder of Agorus, America's first scalable offsite customized construction solution. As an ex-Navy SEAL, Garrett has taken the lessons learned in active duty to build a great company and revolutionize the way America is being built. Garrett, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Looking forward to it.
This is really fascinating. The idea of building a home in 5 days, I really can't wait to dig into that. But first, I'd like you to just kind of set up the problem. What is going on with America's housing right now? And why do we even need a solution like Agorus?
So in general, I'm seeing a handful of trends converge all at the same time, and it's creating this unique opportunity and also a unique crunch. And so global financial crisis 2008, a whole bunch of people leave the trades, understandably so, because it was a huge hit to construction. At that time, those folks never came back. And so what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are telling us is that cumulatively, we've built up a debt over the last 14 years, where we're about 5 million homes underwater. And by underwater, I mean there's a need for those homes, but those homes have not yet been built. As a frame of reference, single family starts right now are doing really well in the 1.5, 1.6 million. So that's 3 or 4 nonstop years of production needed to catch up. Or if you distributed that, it's the equivalent of saying, take your top 100 largest builders across the country, and they would need to double capacity for the next decade in order to catch up. And so I think a lot of people at the human level are looking at this going, why are home prices so high? And why are they continuing to be high regardless of mortgage rates? And I think that the short answer is Econ 101, supply and demand. There's just more demand for housing overall than there is supply. And so with a kind of a labor crunch, as well as a lack of supply, it's just going to be so long before we get out of this. Our company was founded on the idea that we need a technology lever and a technology solution to catch up.
I love that idea. Technology can help us catch up. But talk about the technology that's existed for 100 years. How are homes traditionally being built now and over the past 100 years?
When I talk about residential, I'm usually thinking like generally 4 or 5 stories and below. So light timber construction. You start getting into skyscrapers and it's concrete and steel and there's some material differences. But for single family, multifamily, even these ADUs, which are really popular in California now, they're generally built off of a system that says, hey, you take these studs, so 2x4s or 2x6s, you put them at certain intervals, and you hand build a house, or a lot of people call it stick built because it's a bunch of sticks. That's generally been the way we've framed for 100, 120 years. Now, maybe it was a hammer and nail a while ago, and now we use nail guns, but we have not really evolved in prefabrication. That said, prefabrication is not a new technology. It's not a new process. Sears has been doing catalog homes, or did have catalog homes, post-World War II. Our theory as a business, and it's so far been holding true, is that there's something ingrained in the American psyche that says, I want a home that looks like a home. If we could magically wave a fairy wand and get everybody on board with living in a 20 by 20 cube, IKEA would have crushed this a long time ago. It'd be very, very easy because there's no variation. You just manufacture 10 million of the exact same thing. The problem is construction doesn't work like that. My wife would be the first to say, like, absolutely not. I want to live in a house that looks like X, Y, or Z. Or the local building department where I live in California would say, sorry, it's got to match the neighborhood. It's got to match the lot. And so construction has not been able to absorb or has not been able to take on board prefabrication or offsite manufacturing because everything is always different. And so what we've done as a business is say, we believe that the core heartbeat, the technology that unleashes this is a software that connects customization with mass market prefabrication. And so what our software essentially does, to use a really cheesy analogy, is if you send the software a picture of the Death Star, it'll tell you how many black Lego bricks or gray Lego bricks that are needed to rebuild this structure. That's essentially what construction looks like. You take a complex home with this roof and this architecture or whatever, send it into the software, and then the software breaks that down into zeros and ones so that it can be made on an assembly line with automation in our factory floor.
Before we get even deeper into that, put it in context. A traditional stick-built home will take how long and cost how much?
So the cost varies so much. It depends on the geography. It depends on labor costs, et cetera. Right now in California, I mean, you're seeing $300-400 a square foot becoming really, really common. Obviously, in other parts of the country, that's a bit cheaper. I would say in general, homes on average, I think the National Association of Home Builders says that a home is typically somewhere between 8 to 10 months. With labor shortages, probably 12 plus, but it's generally a really long time. A year is not unrealistic. And a large part of that is just the interconnections between all the different trades. So a typical structure, a home might be 35 different subcontractors. It's like, can you imagine, Brian, going and buying a vehicle and saying, okay, you got to get the tire guy to coordinate with the engine guy, who's got to coordinate with the upholstery guy, and then they all have to work out their schedules and somehow make this thing work? It would be an absolute disaster. So essentially, that's what construction is. It's like the old adage, a camel's a horse designed by committee. You kind of just have a whole bunch of different pieces, but no really cohesive integration across trades.
Garrett, thanks for kind of bringing us up to speed and putting it in context of how homes are traditionally built, how they've been built for the past 100 years, kind of the costs and the timeline that it takes to put that together, and why that's impeding our ability to provide enough homes for the demand that's out there. Now, given all that, you looked at that landscape and said, I'm going to start a company, Agorus, and we're going to solve this problem using technology. Kind of take us through that thought process and how you came to start Agorus.
I never in a million years thought I would have the career path that I had to get here. So I did my undergrad at Stanford, was playing football, loved team sports, wanted to keep doing team stuff. So decided to go into the Navy, spent 12 years as a Navy SEAL. On the back end of that 12, I had my third kid. My wife and I are starting to settle down, went to go build a house, bought a house, realized we should tear it down and try and build our own house because, of course, that'll be an easy thing to do with 3 kids and deployments. Terrible idea. And then as we did that, we realized, oh gosh, this is terrible. And so I ended up becoming an accidental developer, an accidental contractor. And as we walked through that process personally, it made it personal to us. And we realized, oh, this is a problem worth solving. And so ended up co-founding the company with one of my best friends, next door neighbor, and he built his stick built. At the same time, I built mine actually offsite with modular construction. And so we get to watch the differences as kind of a side-by-side case study. And when we did that, we realized that prefabrication needs to come of age. It's finally time. And so with that as the basis, we said, okay, well, why has it not come into its own? And we kind of unpack this and look at the software side of it. And that's what we've created. That's really our unique secret sauce, is this software that unlocks all of the potential that already exists out there. Everything that you're looking at, your microphone, your shirt, your iPhone, your glasses, all of it is made in a manufacturing facility. Well, why are homes not? And so that's what kind of drives us. And there is a tremendous amount of complexity to construction, and it's highly fragmented. But we believe that if you can unlock the software, it taps into all of the technology advances that we take for granted in any other industry, but have not permeated into construction.
I love that you're an ex-Navy SEAL, and thank you for your service to our country.
My pleasure. My wife and kids had it the hardest. I loved what I did.
I'm having a hard time bridging that, you being a Navy SEAL to all of a sudden becoming the software developer that's built a software system that can build a home in 5 days. Like, how did you make that happen?
part of it was, and it's kind of a weak parallel at first glance, but it actually makes a lot of sense. When we look at construction, no one individual problem requires deep technology. This is not drugs and biotech or deep artificial intelligence. A lot of this is just being brilliant at the basics and getting a group of people to all work together in a complex or dynamic environment where you're playing some pickup basketball, somebody doesn't show up, or the board is twisted, or the inspector has, it's a lot of operational expertise. And in many ways, we found it very, very similar to just, hey, go to country X and figure out a lot of how you're going to conduct operations in that area. Those skills translated, I think, really well to construction. We did software by necessity because it was critical, and you hire top talent and you bring in outside experts to help you build that. But I think what my co-founder and I have done is say, hey, here's our North Star and our vision. A lot of this company's growth is going to center around operational excellence and playing whack-a-mole. Software just happens to be one of the key technology levers. And I think in short, the long answer is we fundamentally believe that if not us, then who? I might not have the perfect background for this, and I might not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but if somebody doesn't own this and just try and figure it out and stumble through all the roadblocks, we're going to continue to do the same thing over and over like we have for the last 100 years.
Give us kind of the top-down look at Agorus. I mean, the simple concept is you're building houses in 5 days. What's the bigger picture here?
In 5 days is essentially like a target goal that we're trying to pursue. So background context, I told you kind of a traditional stick built is months. I wish I could say that we are really sharp and we have all these crazy new ideas. The reality is a lot of this is back to the future. So NVR is a national home builder right now. Their predecessor was a company called Ryan Homes. In the 70s, without technology, Ryan Homes was consistently building their homes in 14 days, permits to keys. Now, they did that through a vertically integrated process where it looks more like an automotive line, where you have a team that's well integrated and you have an offsite construction lever that allows you to tap into some of those advances. So we kind of took that as okay, this can be done regardless of what people say. It can and has been done before. Now, how do we bring that into the 21st century? And so the idea is if you can manufacture the bulk of the shell of the home in 8 to 10 hours in a factory, then the rest becomes a lot of job site coordination. And so to be clear, our business model is B2B. We are focused on trying to help and partner with developers. We don't replace them. We're not fully vertically integrated. We don't do customer interaction in the sense of picking out cabinets and countertops, et cetera. What we're trying to get to the point is within 5 days that our developers are at drywall, and then they're getting into all the cosmetic stuff that the homeowner really wants to interact with. And that's where it really starts to accelerate the process, because the bulk of complexity in a home is getting from the slab being poured to drywalls closed in. Because then at that point, light switches and fixtures and paint and flooring, not to downplay it, but those are much simpler, and the consequences of mistakes are much less if you get it wrong.
Using software and using the technology, it kind of describe in a little bit more detail how you're getting the concept to the design to building it out. Like, what's the process there that's happening?
The process that's unique about what we do is that we have one digital singular source of truth. And so when a customer comes to us and says, this is the home we want to build, our software digests it and creates that single source of truth. So then from there, it stays digital all the way out to the factory. And so we have a bill of materials and a takeoff. We have machine code that goes out wirelessly to the machines. Customers can go through virtual reality if they want. There's a lot of digital off-ramps, but there is one singular file. That singular file then feeds the machines. The machines take the complex structure and break it down into a series of 2D panels. So walls, floors, and roofs. Those get extruded or assembled on a linear automotive-like assembly line, and then get loaded into a truck at the very end vertically. So kind of imagine like when you buy IKEA furniture, it's all really compressed and flat stacked and highly efficient. That's the way that we look at shipping the home, because a home is a very large object to ship down the highway. So when you ship it as 2D pieces, it allows you to keep it very dense, and we can fit most homes into one single semi-truck.
How large are these homes?
I think the smallest we've done is a 300 square foot ADU. The largest we've done is a 6,000 square foot, 3-story multifamily home, or multifamily kind of complex.
Oh, so you can do multifamily as well.
Absolutely. We're about to break ground here in the next month, 44 unit townhome apartment style complex here in San Diego.
The digital file, the truth there that you're starting with, I'd imagine that's an architect who puts that together. Are they using specialized software, or is this over-the-counter type software that all architects can use?
Most architects end up using industry standard, which is kind of an AutoCAD or Revit, which is a three-dimensional drafting software. If they give us a napkin, we can use a napkin. It requires a little bit more work on our end, but the software does not necessarily care as much about what the input file is. It takes that design and says, okay, architect, I know what you're looking for here. This is what you want. And then it throws all of the construction data into that structure to know, okay, a stud goes here, a header goes here, all the little construction details that are normally being figured out by the framers at the job site. The software is doing all of those, all of that heavy lifting, so that you can connect what it's supposed to look like with what it actually is in reality.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. What's being built in the factory and how long does it take to build it? You're doing panels for walls, ceilings, floors. I think I heard you say 18 hours or something like that.
Our target metronome is we try to get, and again, it depends a little bit on the size, but we generally try to produce one home's worth of panels per shift. So that's an 8-hour shift in our factory.
How much is this robotics and AI doing this and versus like actual people swinging a hammer?
We have 3 generations of equipment that we've designed and built out. We're really on Gen 1 of the factory, which is still pretty manual. Our Gen 2 equipment is showing up here in the next few months. And then we're anticipating a Gen 3 rollout in next year. And it adds to the level of complexity and the level of automation that can happen. So it's a mixture. All of our machines right now are software driven, but there's still more touch points on material handling and kind of giving the flexibility to kind of adjust as curveballs come up. But eventually we envision our factory to be, again, more like a Tesla factory and less like a job site.
And with the labor pool just being so tight, I mean, there's just not enough people to build homes and do construction. Like, compare the number of people involved in making a home through the Agorus method versus the traditional method.
I should actually have these numbers off the top of my head. I would say it's something like a 50x decrease in man hours. So number of people hours to build the home, it might be, I'm trying to think, let's do the math real quick. It's probably 50 man hours in a factory, and it's probably north of 500 at least at a job site. In fact, even more than that as I think about it. It might even be closer to 1,000. So it's a very significant, I guess we use the term lever. So using technology to replace human labor, not just from a safety perspective and a speed perspective, but also as cost. And like you mentioned, one of the stats coming out of the Census Bureau right now, I think, is for every 5 folks leaving the trades, there's only 2 in the younger generation backfilling. I think I read somewhere in one of the states that it was like 1% of the labor force in that specific trade, electrical or plumbing, is under the age of 30. 1%.
Labor right now is at the top of everyone's list of problems, but then also supply chain. How is that affecting you?
I think one of the things that's nice when you start to look at manufacturing operations, you can centralize it and you can put it into a factory. So I have the luxury of taking a rail car worth of material at a time directly from the source, from the mill in this case. You can't get a rail car to go to the job site. It doesn't work like that. And so you end up having extra layers of inefficiency and cost and waste as you go through layers of distributors that then have to drive trucks out to the job site, which have to offload the material, et cetera. So by being able to buy in bulk and consolidate your orders, it actually has given us a tremendous amount of latitude. Now, to be clear, our supply chain ability to get materials is not an issue for us. However, lumber's in a once in a lifetime kind of volatile spike right now. I joke with the team or with investors that I would have less gray hairs if we were building our homes out of Bitcoin. That's how volatile lumber is right now.
What's the cost differential? Your cost to build a home per square foot compared to the traditional method, and then the end buyer's cost to, in both regards.
We are at or below market value everywhere we build. That's at a face level value. Where the real value comes in is the amount of money a developer saves by that time savings and the carrying cost on their capital, the amount of money they save with less material waste, less dumpsters, less porta potty rentals, less fence rentals, all the other things that become associated with a 9-month build. When you smash that down into days or weeks, all of that is ROI. It's back in the pocket of the developer. So it's a slightly different way of looking at it. To use another example, it's like if you go on Tesla's website and you look at the car price, it doesn't factor in the total savings because now by filling up with electricity and not with gas, you're saving a bunch of money. It didn't necessarily go into Tesla's pocket, but the value of what they created produced significant savings by doing it in a different way than everybody else.
Because time is money. If you're building a home and it's taking you 12 months, well, you've got to pay to live somewhere else during that period. You're paying property tax for a home you're not living in, all kinds of carrying costs. That makes a lot of sense.
For a lot of your listeners that are dealing with investment properties or rental properties, one of the big things that we're starting to see as a huge trend as interest rates go up is build to rent, as single family build to rent. And when you get into that field, specifically that time matters, not just in the carrying cost on building the structure, but also that's 9 more months of rent that you're now starting to get positive cash flow on that. And so I almost actually think that the speed savings and the time savings is even more beneficial for investors than it is actual homeowners, because they understand the value of that time in a financial context more than perhaps the family or the homeowner like my wife and I that might be worried about cabinets and countertops and yard layout. The investors, they know that clock is ticking and they're burning money in the process.
Especially if they're getting an interest-only loan for a 12 to 18 month or 24-month period from the lender, the sooner they can get to cash flow, just the better the numbers turn out.
And the less risk that there's something crazy in the market that happens 9 months from now and there's a downturn or whatever it is. It buys down risk for the investor.
Absolutely, especially on the larger developments, which I'm doing one right now, and that timeline. It's like if you can compress that, it makes a huge difference. What's the difference in quality between what you're building and what the traditional stick-built method would build?
The sad truth is, I wish I could get homeowners and developers to care more about the quality difference, but most of the time when it's behind the wall, nobody knows. So we actually end up building with a much higher grade lumber than everybody else does. We also have machines that are accurate to within a 16th of an inch. So everything fits precisely. And I think it's kind of, for a framer especially, the very first time we have a customer and we go to a job site, they're like, there's no way that this is going to work. There's no way you can build it accurately. And then when all the pieces just fit and it's got that automotive like tolerance where you're just boom, ka-thunk, 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 and all the pieces go together, it kind of is an aha light bulb moment for people where they're like, oh my gosh, I could never get that level of accuracy by hand and that level of precision and quality, because it's very difficult for a human being to be that accurate, but a machine's going to be that accurate every single time, no matter what. So when the software is good, it powers a machine that's accurate, and that accuracy then transcends to the job site where you get a really tight, well-built home.
You've described the process and the quality that you're getting, and it all makes sense, but there's always those groups that you're dependent on to get these things done that say, no, that's not the way it's done. And I'm thinking specifically of lenders, and I'm thinking of municipalities. Let's start with lenders. What kind of pushback do you get from lenders, or do they accept these methods and make the same loans and construction loans and home loans on your Agorus properties as they would on traditional stick built?
The good part is, and this was kind of a core heartbeat when we started the businesses, we don't want other people to have to change their business model or their practices any more than they absolutely have to blend in with new technology. And so we said, hey, look, it's got to fit within the current ecosystem. So lenders honestly don't even know the difference. It's the exact same material. It is built that much faster so that you can start to get your construction draws quicker. And we bill and invoice within the current ecosystem. So there's no, I have to pay for it before it leaves the factory, or some of those other issues that lenders oftentimes have with offsite construction. It's, just imagine that framer that you were going to use, instead of, framing that house in 30 or 60 days, is now done in 2. Okay, cool. Then the bank inspector, or however the process works for that institution, just comes out and is like, okay, it's framed. They honestly, 99 times out of 100, they don't even know how it got done. They're just like, yeah, it looks like a house.
What about municipalities, codes, inspectors, compliance? I mean, how often do you have an inspector come in and say, oh, no, you can't do it that way, after you've already done it, built it in the factory, and they change it up on you?
Ironically, way less than we'd actually thought. Very similar in that most of them come out to the job site and don't even ask any questions because they don't know any different. It looks identical to the way it was built normally. So there's no gotcha. Now, that said, we've also started to proactively work with a lot of job site inspectors and go, hey guys, I'll send you 4K video from the factory, or I'll zoom you in if you want to watch it getting built, and even come visit the facility and understand and see what it looks like. And when they do that, they're like, I don't need to see this anymore. You guys are light years ahead of anybody else I'm working with. I trust you because I'm looking at your source code and I'm watching your machines. Nobody at the job site by hand can ever match that. You guys, like, not that you're above reproach, but I'm not even in a position, nor do I need to micromanage that. You're good.
So where are the jagged edges in your system? I mean, where do you get pushback? Where do you have the challenges in building homes this way?
The biggest challenge is the complacency of the status quo. Change is hard. When you've got people in the industry that are so used to doing it for so long in a certain way, it becomes very, very difficult to adjust, because somehow, even though it's not our intent, new technology is threatening. And if not properly understood, are you trying to put me out of a job, Garrett? Or are you saying that carpentry is no longer needed, electricians and plumbers, these are going away? And it requires some explaining to go, no, the nail gun didn't replace the carpenter. It just made hammering nails faster than doing it by hand. We view this as the next evolution, saying we will always need a strong, talented labor force across the country. But if that labor force continues to dip, we need to take that core that remains and juice up their capability and productivity with technology. So it's designed to be a tool that enhances and scales and grows businesses and makes people more money, not to somehow eradicate human beings from the job site.
How else are you pushing with that technology? I mean, are you bringing in more efficiencies to, say, utility usage, including solar panels, geothermal? I mean, how do you integrate with ways to save costs for the end user over a longer period of time?
One of the big initiatives that we have that is taking some time to kind of, again, it's part of that messaging and branding. I don't think people realize the biggest contributor to carbon across the planet is not vehicles, it's homes. 40% of global carbon emissions come from heating and cooling of buildings. And so people don't like to think about insulation or heating and cooling a house because it's like, yeah, whatever, don't care, there's a wall. The reality is building a home better, building the thermal envelope of a building is the single greatest ROI that goes into home construction, especially because, spoiler alert, energy prices aren't going down. And so what we're taking a look at is saying, okay, because we're in this unique technology stage where we can actually build a home that is better and potentially either uses less electricity, or in some cases, you can even get to the point where it's a passive house where it requires no electricity to heat and cool, it starts to then pay dividends for the lifespan of the home. So we're in the process of rolling out some early, essentially net zero or net zero ready type products where people can basically be completely energy independent on the home as long as they throw some solar on their roof, because the home now no longer needs that much energy to heat and cool because it's so well built.
If you're building on a shift enough panels for one home, then I'd imagine you're building approximately 365 homes a year.
I wish it was that consistent. We're trying to scale up to actually even be above that by the end of the year. the manufacturing becomes one of the challenges we have is connecting the manufacturing with then can the customers and can the job site start to take that many homes that quickly? So we work with developers as partners to say, if you want to move at 21st century speeds, we need to help you think about how you schedule all of your trades, including, all the pieces that follow after us or the pieces before us. And so a lot of it is just kind of working with them to start thinking in days, not months. And it's exciting. It just adds a little extra complexity to the business model.
So you're one company doing this. I mean, we need millions of homes. I mean, you set it up at the top. We just don't have enough homes. It's going to take 10 years to even come close to having enough homes. How do we scale what you're doing? I know there are other companies doing what you're doing too, but at what point do we start to scale where this becomes a lot more commonplace?
I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later by necessity due to the declining labor and increasing demand for housing. Part of our view is this is not a winner takes all game. This market could have $10 billion companies and still not. I haven't even talked about outside of the US, and I haven't even talked about vertical kind of getting into apartment style buildings. There is so much that needs to happen. Our view is that if we can build the technology that is scalable, then we can license or sell that technology to other builders that are already doing this, and then they can in turn build faster. There's no future in which Agorus is building every home in the United States. That's not how the industry works. But if we can build this new tool that can then take all the builders that are already doing all that construction and then double or triple their capacity, now we have a chance at really moving the needle.
What then would you leave with our listeners? I mean, what's the takeaway message you want them to have about Agorus and the future of home building?
Don't lose hope in technology. A lot of people have written construction off and said it's always going to be complacent. It's always going to be, behind, and it's going to be slow, et cetera. And I would ask that if people walk away with nothing else from this conversation, a realization that there's a moment coming in construction in the very near future that looks a lot like Tesla, where all of a sudden now Detroit and internal combustion engines look like a relic of the past because the future has happened and now everybody's shifting to electric vehicles. I believe that moment is coming up very, very soon in construction where we're going to look back and go, oh yeah, hey, Brian, do you remember when we used to build homes on site by hand? Oh yeah, kind of with a nostalgia of like a manual transmission where it's a thing, it's a relic of a bygone era. I believe that is coming for construction because the market will demand it, and we just want to be at the forefront of that wave.
How soon?
We're going to see a tipping point in the next 12 to 24 months where out of necessity, you will see prefabrication start being on the tip of everybody's tongue when it comes to construction and real estate. And it's not then it becomes not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when and how quickly everybody else can catch up. Anyone
listening to this who's about to build a home is probably thinking, oh, how do I get Agorus to build my home for me? What's your footprint? What's your area? And where can you actually help people? So right now, we're really pretty much limited to Southern California and Arizona. We're trying to expand out to Texas and Florida, Northern California quickly thereafter. We are trying to grow as fast as we absolutely can. There's no shortage of demand, which is a good thing. It's a matter of scaling up our factories and our machinery, et cetera. So I think that the biggest thing would be just if people want to connect and reach out on LinkedIn. And I have my allegiance in this fight is to prefabrication. And so oftentimes I'm the quickest one to point to competitors or alternatives in the space and go, try this, they're better set up in your market, or try this, it's a different technology for what you're looking for. So like I've said, this is not a zero-sum game. So to the best of my knowledge, I'm still learning, but I will absolutely pass any prefabrication knowledge and or redirects as needed if it's something that we can't support. And how would people find out more about Agorus, get a hold of you, get a hold of Agorus, and have this conversation? Easiest way is via our website or to connect with me directly on LinkedIn. Say, hey, heard you and Brian on the podcast. Love to chat about XYZ. I want to learn. I want to help. We're always looking for construction technologists as we hire and as we partner with other folks that have a like-minded passion to bring technology into the industry. So happy to connect and talk shop. And can they go to agorus.com to see? I know when I looked at your website, there was more information. There was some pretty cool footage. Agorus, right? Agorus.com. Definitely check it out. Garrett, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm really excited. I always get excited about technology. I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing it with our listeners. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure, Brian. Thanks so much for having me.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.